Hello everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have my November wrap-up. So November has ended up being one of the best reading months I've had in a little while because I ended up reading 13 books for a total of 3,534 pages. I don't think I've hit over 2,000 something pages in a little while. I will say it's because I attempted to do the 30 and 30 manga challenge. I definitely did not hit 30 volumes of manga in 30 days, but I was focusing a little bit more on manga, and so that did help my page count. Overall, I'm very excited about it. We are going to jump into some stats I have here, and then we will go over the books that I read. So, I read 2 ebooks and 11 physical books in the month. This is actually very different than the last few months. Usually, I've been reading a lot more ebooks versus physical books, just because it was so much easier with a new baby, but I did read quite a few physical books. 2 of those were contemporary, 3 were fantasy, and 8 were romance. 4 of them were novels, and 9 were manga. All 13 of them were traditionally published, no indie books this month. 1 was a middle grade, 3 were young adult, and 9 were adult titles. 2 of them were books that I had owned previously, and 11 were books that I bought this year. So I guess that's good. And then for the star ratings, I had 1 2-star, 2 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 9 5-star reads. So yeah, overall, the numbers were pretty good. I had more books read than I thought I was going to, more pages read than I thought I was going to. Overall, most of my reads were 4, 4.5, or 5 star. So it was a really good reading month. I will say November also felt like it took forever. So like some of these books that I'm going to talk about, I forgot that I read in November because it felt like it was like a month ago or like more than a month ago. But yeah, I guess we're going to start at the lowest rated book, my 2-star read, and then move up to my favorite book of the month. So my lowest rated book was the Quintessential Quintuplets Volume 1 by Neji Haruba. So this is a book, actually had a few volumes of this that I got in a humble bundle that was Kodansha manga. And there are some ones that I have read, and actually there's some that I'm reading currently this month in December from that same bundle that I'm absolutely loving. But this series is obviously just not for me. I did give it 2 stars. It feels very fan service-y. Basically, it follows a teenage boy who is getting roped into being the tutor of quintuplets. Every single girl has a very like specific personality. They're all dressed a very certain way, and he's telling this story from the future on his wedding day to one of the sisters. And I think part of it is that we're not supposed to know who it is. I really don't, and I'm never going to because I'm not going to read this series anymore. But I was just sort of uncomfortable reading it. And like I said, very fan service-y. The premise of this story makes it feel like it should have been written by a woman, should be more of like a shoujo sort of story. However, it is written by a man, and I'm sure it's probably more of a shonen sort of story, and it's just not my thing. So I did rate it low because I did not like what was going on, but I know I have some friends that do actually like this series, so it's just one that's definitely not for me. Going into my 4-star reads, the first one I have here is Boys Run the Riot, Volume 4 by Keito Gaku. This is the last book in this series. I gave the first 3 volumes of this 5 stars each. This one felt like a little bit of a letdown in the fact that it was the conclusion, and while it did have some good stuff in here, it has basically our main characters actually like trying to start their clothing brand and there's like almost like a mentor character who's like, hey, let's showcase this sort of stuff. But I think because the other volumes were also so focused on our main character, who is a trans teen, discovering his identity and feeling more comfortable with that, that wasn't in here as much, and so it was a very sort of wrap up volume, and while I still really enjoyed it, it just didn't have as much emotional impact for me personally. I do think it was a pretty good conclusion to the series, and I definitely want to read more by this manga author as well in the future. This series is own voices because part of it is sort of related to his life, because he is trans as well. So I don't know exactly how much with like the clothing line aspect is, but yeah, I do think it was a good conclusion. I was just expecting a little bit more based on the first 3 volumes of the series. Then the next 4-star I have here is Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston. This is going to be something sort of similar to Boys Run the Riot. This is not the conclusion to the series at all, but I do feel like this was a little bit of a letdown because of how much I loved Amari and the Night Brothers that I read last year. We are still following Amari in this like supernatural hidden world. It's almost like a Men in Black but fantasy version of it instead of sci-fi. But we didn't really get into the action of like what the Great Game means until over 100 pages in. I think it was closer to 170 pages into this book, and it felt very much like second book syndrome. We had like the summary at the beginning of this book about like what happened in the last book, and they kept bringing up stuff like that, where if you're reading these books in order, I don't think you necessarily needed as much of the refresher. Then again, it is a middle grade series. Maybe they thought that younger kids might actually need that. I still really liked our characters. The writing style is pretty good and very engaging, but it took a while to actually get going. And then by the time we got to the end of the book, I didn't really see like us progressing very much through this story, because the problem that is in this book we never really got a full conclusion for. We got a little bit, but it's mostly still open-ended for the next story. So again, it was just a little bit of a letdown for me personally compared to the first book. Okay, moving into the 4.5-star I have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This was a book that you guys actually voted on for me to read. I picked it up myself and I definitely enjoyed my time reading it. 4.5 stars. However, I was so sure through this entire book that I was going to give it 5 stars. Like, so sure. I loved the writing style, I loved the characters, I loved the witty banter throughout this entire story. But I also knew, because of the fact that this is a romance, there was probably only one way for this story to end. And I was correct. However, the way it was executed just did not hit it for me. It fell flat. It didn't feel necessary. There was like stuff that was going on where I'm like, we could have tightened this up a little bit, because of the fact that like I knew what the ending was going to have to be, just based on this book and based on stuff in this genre and based on like stories that I've read that are very similar to this or watched that are similar to this. And so because of that, I was quite disappointed in the ending. Like, I absolutely loved everything else about it. And so, yeah, literally that's the only thing. I can't even get into it because, like, you know, spoilers and everything, but I was just hoping for more from the ending based on everything else about it, because I absolutely loved everything else about it. I will say this does also have to deal with grief and stuff like that. It's not like an overarching storyline, but because our main character is somebody who can like see ghosts and this kind of stuff, and her family works in a mortuary, like obviously we have those tones, and so just be aware of that if that's something you don't want to get into with some lighthearted romance as well. But yes, I did love this. I just was disappointed in the ending. Okay, and so moving into the 5-star reads, I do have 9 of them, but 7 of them are from the same series. It's going to be the last 7 volumes of Sweat and Soap by Kintetsu Yamada. So I do actually have volume 5, volume 6, volume 7, volume 8, volume 9, volume 10, and then volume 11. So this series, I know I've definitely talked about it on my channel, but it's been a little while since I have not been as good about reading manga this year, but I did actually pick up all of these volumes like in October or something like that, because I sort of went a little bit crazy. I think my book buying ban is officially just like gone, and yeah, I picked up the last 7 volumes, read them all this month, at the very beginning of the month basically. Absolutely adored them. 5 out of 5 stars. Like, this is one of my favorite manga series. It is very much adult romance, but it is so much of the like learning to live with a partner and first relationships, and like they full on talk about their problems and everything. And as you can tell from like this cover here, volume 11, if it will show you, there's a wedding. Like, it literally takes you through their entire relationship in this series. Like, all 11 volumes take you from day 1 through marriage. Like, it is just so good that way. Like, I absolutely loved everything. Like, this is what I would want more romance books to be, just being able to see more of the relationships, see more of the characters. They do have problems and stuff, but they talk them through, and like we get to experience that. I absolutely love this, like 100%. The next 5-star read I have is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is almost the exact opposite of The Dead Romantics. As I first started reading this, I felt like it was very slow, took a while to get going, and part of this could have been that it took me like over a week to get more than 100 and something pages in, just because I was reading it physically with the baby, and I do find physical books to be a little bit harder, which is why I was so surprised at the beginning of this video when I only had 2 ebooks and 11 physical books, because it's been hard. It's a struggle. But once I got past that, like, not quite a midpoint, but there was a point in this where I get past that and I devoured it. I had to keep reading. I absolutely loved it. The characters in this one is the big selling point to me personally. Basically, this is following our main character, who is like sort of training to be a librarian. I don't think they call them librarians. I can't remember currently, but she grew up in a library. She's an orphan. She grew up in this library, and in these libraries, the books are alive. There are grimoires. There are different classifications, because like the lower level class ones are very, very benign, you know, friendly even. And then you get up to like 8, 9, 10, and they can be very tricky and that kind of thing. And she ends up getting accused of something really, really bad happening at the library that she's at. And then she befriends I believe a sorcerer is what they call them in this world. And she's trying to solve like exactly what happened. So there is that mystery aspect. But again, the characters. There's also romance in here. Like, it is a very well-rounded book. Like I said though, at the beginning I felt it was a little bit slow. It could have just been a me problem, but because of that I thought this book was going to end up being like a 4-star, but no, once I got to like that maybe halfway point or so, I could not put it down. I had to continue, and yeah, full 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. And then finally, my last 5-star, my favorite book of the month, is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is one of those books that I forgot that I read this month, just because of the fact that this month has felt like forever. But I did read Under the Whispering Door last month, had to read this one this month. Absolutely, absolutely fell in love with it. 100%. I don't know if I can necessarily pick my favorite because the vibes are so different. Like, I know in my TBR video I had a couple of different people like talk about how they really, really liked Under the Whispering Door, or they really liked this one, and like I know a lot of people say that this one is their favorite, and then when they went into Under the Whispering Door, the vibes are so different. They weren't entirely sure about that one, and I'm glad I read them in the order that I did, just because the vibes are so, so different. But the way TJ Klune writes characters, again, characters are what sell things for me. The characters in this are immaculate. Like, I absolutely loved everything about this. I loved the children that live here, because basically we're following a character who is older. I want to say he's in his 40s, and he's sort of like an evaluator of these orphanages for magical children, and he's going to this one for like a month because it's so far out to see about these like special magical children there. Yeah, it is definitely like a found family sort of story. I loved every single character. Every single character in here. Yes, favorite book of the month. I want to say Under the Whispering Door was my favorite book last month, so like 2 TJ Klunes in a row. Yeah, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And that is going to be it. Can we even see? There we go. There's all the books. Like I said, I think a couple times in this video, I did so much better this month than I thought, just because I've been mostly focused on ebooks and stuff before, because it was easier to read with the kids, and I surprised myself so much. But yeah, overall, very, very good. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more videos. I do currently have videos coming out on Thursdays, so I will see you then. Bye!